Hey, look, it evolved eyes on stalk so it can look over the plant. Hi, for those of you new here, this is evolution simulation game The Sapling, my solo indie game project. It's a game where you can basically do two types of things. On the one hand, there are a number of scenarios tasking you to design an ecosystem that meets specific requirements. On the other, there's a sandbox where you can build your own plants and animals, turn on random mutations and see how they evolve. By far the most popular video on this YouTube channel is a summary of an experiment where I do the latter, but for 7 days straight and broadcast live over at Twitch. No manual designing or any other type of player interference. I just turned it on and then, like a biologist in the wild, watched and described what happened. Quite a number of people have asked me to do that again now that the Fight and Flight update is out, so a few weeks back I did just that. This is the summary of what happened. As starter organisms I created this plant and this animal. I chose an animal with hands specifically because I hoped the hands would evolve into wings, which, spoiler alert, did not happen. A lot of other cool stuff did happen though, so I'm not disappointed. The first very successful plant family that we saw looked like this. It uses a leaf type that was added as part of the latest update because I felt the game was lacking a more flexible type of leaf that can survive in multiple environments. This leaf does just that, turning any plants that have it into early settlers. For any region, much more efficient plants are possible and most probably will evolve and take over later. But as long as they are not here yet, these plants will flourish. The only places where they cannot grow though are the colder areas. There we see a different, more cold-hardy family of plants emerge. This situation with two families, one quick settlers, the other cold-hardy, is something that would be stable for multiple days. And even after that, when other plant families arrived, you could see both of them around almost until the end. The animals quickly evolved these feet, which can carry a lot of weight. This means the animal can be large and fat and have all kinds of heavy body parts, like the tusks you see here, and still be able to walk around relatively fast. I've noticed that this food type often seems to be a one-way ticket though. It allows animals to become really heavy, but once that has happened, it is the only food type in the game that can still support these animals. Indeed, all major successful animal families during this 7-day run had these feet. On the second day, we see the first forests forming on two locations. This is something that inevitably happens if you wait long enough, but it is a slow process. This is because larger plants need lots of energy, so smaller plants can only evolve to be larger once they are really good at collecting it. And even after larger plants emerge, they take a while to spread because their reproduction cycle is so much slower than that of smaller plants. Walking around in the forest were these heavy herbivores. Mostly blind, except for the simple photoreceptors in their tails, they walked around randomly until they bumped into a tree. On day 3, a major thing happened. The plants in the south evolved spikes, hurting any animal that eats them. With so many herbivores around, this is a huge advantage, as they now basically killed whatever killed them. This forced the animals, which so far were still living as a single colony more or less in the area where they started, to move to a new location. Interestingly, the population split in two because of this, with some animals migrating to the west of the lake and others to the east. The two groups will evolve in very different ways as a result. As an example, a day later for the western species, the photoreceptors on their tails had evolved into compound eyes, allowing for much better vision, albeit for short distances. Along with the eyes, we see an instinct that will be there in every single successful western species from now on. If you see the color green, go towards it. It is so successful of course because these animals rely on plants as their food source, and all plants are green, so this instinct basically is go to food. Not only does this help animals collect the energy they need to reproduce, it also prevents them from wandering randomly into a place that is dangerous for them. It's of course an instinct that totally makes sense, and one of the first instincts players will add when manually creating animals, but I was really happy to also see it evolve on its own. Another thing you see here is that this animal has tusks and 2 sets of horns, something which it can easily carry because of its feet. However, all of this results in long embryo development times, so at this point you often saw large areas completely covered in eggs. Meanwhile, in the northeast, the first super efficient plant had emerged, using large round leaves to maximize the amount of sunlight it can catch. However, because this leaf needs a specific temperature range that was available here, but not in the surrounding areas, the species was essentially locked into this one small spot. This created a weird situation with a world behaving more or less like a continuum, except here in the northeast, where you see a sharp divide with a really different group of plant species evolving in a completely different direction. On day 6, however, the northeastern plants finally managed to break free. This happened because a species emerged with a less efficient but more heat-resistant type of leaves. Because of these leaves, this species could live in the surrounding area and thus colonized large new parts of the map. And once these plants reached other areas with more moderate temperatures, the circular leaves simply evolved again, as some sort of convergent evolution within the family. At this point, most parts of the map were covered in dense forests, meaning a lot of food for all animals. Because of this, most animal species had grown to be very large as well, compared to the starter animal from day 1. Apart from this increased size, the animals in the east remained relatively stable around this period. In the west, on the other hand, rapid innovation was happening. Various species over there had eyes on stalks, allowing them to look much further into the distance. This means they could get maximum value out of their go-to food instinct, and even survive in areas where appropriate plants are few and far between. Another Western innovation is that a few species emerged that were specialized for living really high up north. To survive the cold, they didn't only have fur, but also a thick layer of fat serving as insulation, something they could easily carry, again, because of their feet. On the 7th and last day of the experiment, the forest that started to form already on the 2nd day had finally conquered the entire map, meaning that for every possible environment, a plant species evolved to collect energy efficiently enough to grow really large. Interestingly though, there were no longer any large herbivores walking around. This is because spikes evolved again, like we saw on day 3. But whereas back then the animals living in the south could simply migrate to another place, this time all animals living in the east simply were not able to adapt to their new living environment quickly enough and went extinct. And so the only animal species surviving at the end of this experiment are the animals we met on day 6, living high up north. And this is how one small animal with hands, living in a largely open environment in the south, evolved into a small group of large tusked animals living in a cold forest on the other side of the map. And that was the experiment for this time. There's one last experiment I would like to do though, before I fully focus on developing the next major update. I thought it would be really cool to publish another version of this video, but narrated by a David Attenborough impressionist. And I indeed found a really good one.
I can sound exactly like Sir David Attenborough. Wouldn't that make a lovely voiceover for a video about a game all about nature?
Once the channel hits 1000 subscribers, I will rewrite the script of this video to sound more like a nature documentary and hire this voice artist to narrate them. And finally, as always, if this video has made you want to play the game, you can. It is available right now in early access on Steam and itch. See the links below.